Alright, so here we are in the 1545 turn. Starting it off. Started rolling events. A few interesting ones here. England's got an exceptional year. Well, actually, Portugal lost its monarch again. They had a penalty on them last time for plots at court, and they had a child. Well, the +2 penalty killed off their monarch. They rolled up another one, equally bad, this time a 3-3-7 instead of a 7-3-3. But at least it's an adult this time. But then in the events phase, we got an answer to a question somebody had. What happens when you go bankrupt? They got a bad event, scandal, drops their diplomacy to 1, not a big drop from 3, and costs them $50. They didn't have the $50. They're bankrupt. Now this is something that happens if you fail to pay off a foreign loan when it's due. If you can't either extend it with another by getting a different loan or whatever. Here's the net effects. Stability drops by 4 levels. Ouch. Okay, that's pretty bad. 2 manufacturers chosen at random are eliminated. I'll roll. But that's both levels of those manufacturers. That's harsh. You know, that takes, if it's a double level one, that takes 4 turns to recover, and it's a little chunk of income and everything. 4 levels of commercial fleets lost, chosen by the bankrupt player. Okay, that again is going to take 4 turns to recover, but maybe not that terrible in effect. 15 victory points lost. It's also an unfavorable and permanent effect for the player when he rolls on the loans table. Actually, it's per period, not really permanent. Anyway, that's why it sucks. Alright, I'll be back. And the rest of the event phase was rather tame. We had a revolto down here in Algarve. A diplomatic shake-up, which cost Venice a couple of points and things, especially Savoy dropping down completely off their alliance chart. And then a no event, which I'm not sure quite what to do with these. There's events that are repeated on the table. Normally they have a D or an R after them saying, hey, this is a non-repeatable event. Some events actually can happen more than once. In this case, actually, it's a repeatable event that can happen more than once, but it can only happen twice, and it's happened twice, the expansion of the Mughals. There's later expansions, but they're from a later period. The other two have a D and an R. This one doesn't. The D or the R is usually the backup, which says, yeah, you know, if you can't do this event, take a D or an R. But in this case, there isn't one. It's a non-repeatable event. Somewhere it says what to do. It probably says to roll again, but I like there being non-events being able to pop into play. I don't think everything should always have to have something. Anyway, we're walking into the dip phase. Hey, I remembered it this time. Big decisions to make here. France has their war with Milan. If they don't take it this turn, they have to decline the event. There may be a cost to that as well. Can they get Turkey involved in this? Or are they, France, alone against Spain, the Habsburgs, and Venice, which doesn't sound pleasing? Or do the two powers just buckle to that alliance? Personally, I think Turkey wants this war. They're not in the best of shape. They would have liked to have gotten their stability up a little higher. But, you know, they gotta get something out of this. And if it means a war with both the Mamluks and with the Habsburgs, so be it, I think. And France wants it too. So, yeah, let's see. On the positive side of it all, the Mamluks dropped down on the chart to royal marriage. That means Venice won't be able to bring them into a war. If Turkey attacks the Mamluks, Venice can intervene in their favor. But that diplomatic shakeup did a good job on the Mamluks. relationship with Venice, and that means something interesting there, doesn't it? Curious. Alright, this diplomatic phase was a tough one, and it actually kind of prevented me from playing for a while as I mulled over what the decisions were going to be. You know, when I've got one of these hard calls in my head, sometimes I just don't really want to make the decision. And if I was playing in a real game with other people, of course, these discussions would happen more naturally and fluidly. But in this game, I don't feel too bad taking the time. And it also gave me time to play a game of Elric with my wife, which was about as unpleasant as I remember it being. And other people seemed to really like it, but I wasn't thrilled. Okay, so let's see what happened. France just could not get Turkey to agree that it was in Turkey's best interest to drop their stability and get into this war. But France wants the war. It cost them too stability to avoid the war. These are the kind of things that are tough, but they know they're going to be facing Spain, the Habsburgs, probably Venice, and indeed Venice jumped into the war. You can see they used their casus belli to join in. Again, it costs less to join the war than it would to break that alliance. At the end of this turn, that alliance is gone. So next turn, at the end of the turn, Venice could make a separate peace without breaching the alliance. They're also kind of itching for a fight. They were itching for a fight against Turkey, though, and they're a little worried that they're going to get tied down into this French war, and the Turks are going to enter next turn. In fact, that's what the Turks told France. Hey, I'm not ready this turn, but I'll come rocking in next turn. And that'll probably help you somewhat, because Venice will be put into a position where maybe they have to fight. Call Spain in, and Spain either has to break the alliance or declare war on me or whatever. Turkey did, however, declare war on the Knights. They want to wipe them out. And that's actually a free declaration of war, but it ups the ante and says the Turks can actually land there. They think they'll have enough money to prosecute that war. They don't feel like they'd have enough money and other advantages. They're kind of hoping to hit Arquebus before they attack the Mamluks, which is one of the factors in their favor here. And then the thought of, well, attacking the Habsburgs directly, they can gain from that, but that's a lot less of a desirable outcome. They're already not going to get the "we destroyed Hungary" effect. Then in terms of influencing minors, England was the only one who played in this world. They tried for the Palatinate again, but they got Genoa up to Expeditionary Corps, putting themselves in kind of a position of, hey, we're going to defend Calais because we've got allies who are willing to step in against France. Let's see how effective that really is. But so far, France hasn't gotten Calais, and, well, maybe it's not a terribly interesting goal for them. All right, into the economics. Okay, well, we're ready to rock into the rounds, and in this case, Portugal has decided to save up and actually take a loan to try to make a circumnavigation. They're out of trading posts. This is actually a problem that you kind of, if you try to cover the entire port situation into Africa, into Asia, well, you end up using a lot of them. Now, I could discard these and tear them up to build new ones, but I want to increase the riches of some of my others before I start thinking about that, because these guys don't produce a lot. They only produce one each. I've also got this army that I really need to get home somehow. Maybe I'll sail them home on their way. And Albuquerque built the last of all things Timor here. But yeah, it creates too much of a density along the African coast with their trading posts. On the other hand, they really need to start focusing on grabbing some colonies in the territory that they're allowed to have them. So I'm probably going to expend my later conquistadors, whatever I get, towards trying to develop that, because that's really not grown as much as I'd like. What else? Well, France, Spain, and Venice are preparing for their war. You'll see France has they built up a new army and they put a mercenary there. They have the Bavarians, which they took. Habsburgs got their reinforcements. Venice tried for leaders for Tuscany and Parma. They didn't get anyone, so they're kind of in a cheesy location there. The Knights got their fortification level improved. That's not hard to do. They just take a defensive action, reinforcement action, and they probably will get that. Spain didn't have any allies other than the Habsburgs, so they could afford to roll on this. If they had another ally, they would have been forced to make a tough choice, because you can only roll for 2 countries at a time. Turks rolled for Algeria and got some additional forces there, mainly with transportation capabilities. We're going to make a try at it. You know, if we can knock them out of there, it's a good thing. It makes life a little easier on the Turks. Alright, I guess we're ready to start the rounds. Okay, so a couple of things as I start the rounds. First of all, I forgot to mention, Venice spent, it's like 20 bucks on this to produce a privateer. Basically, it's not going to help Venice a lot. It's not going to hurt France that much. But Venice has so much money that by hurting France a little bit at that cost seems worth their while. Now, also, Venice and Spain are allied, so they move together. They move together at their choice of whose turn, and they chose to go first in the turn. I think there's generally an advantage to moving first. Alright, on to the rounds. I forgot to mark this down. Completion of the first round. France launched a siege into Milan, which was entirely successful. In the first round, they got a 10, allowing them to storm it. They attacked, took limited losses. It's kind of a risky move to do that, but they kind of want to get control of the area before they have to deal with Venice and or the Habsburg forces. The Habsburgs charged into Bavaria, got repulsed on one side, but over in Ansbach they laid a siege down. We see Algerians landing on Rhodes. They failed. Never quite sure how to read this. The way the rules are stated, you can retreat into a fleet if you own the city. But, you know, with a siege, a landing like this, it would basically means you'd have a limited chance, and there's a fairly limited chance of getting a foothold there, of maintaining your army. Otherwise, your army is just destroyed. And it seems like if you're sailing in and supporting an invasion like that, you might be able to get out. I know some games don't work that way. I think Empires and Arms, if you fail to make a landing, you're destroyed. And that's how I've usually played this. That really hoses the Turks in terms of being able to take these one little space islands, not just from the Knights, but also from Venetians. Oh, our poor Portuguese. They kind of went for a kind of risky exploration. Got down there, but lost their explorer. And, you know, they kind of needed him, not just for the around the world trip they wanted to make, but they got to get these guys home. And they're going to make an attempt at doing that without a navigator. They do not have an admiral even, because they lost Albuquerque. He attempted to investigate into Carnatic. So things are going kind of poorly for them. For the Spaniards, they're pushing into the Amazon here, and also spread out to locations that they want to build colonies in. The Amazon's worth some points. The French did not sail out with Roberval. One reason, I think they've got an explorer before Roberval completely dies. They certainly have Villagnon, but I think they may have another one in there. And, you know, sailing out without an explorer, without an admiral who can lead a fleet overseas, is just really a risky maneuver, and they'd rather wait until they have someone who can make that. It's possible they could have gotten a mercenary. They did draw one and paid for him. They could have gotten a mercenary explorer, which would have been kind of a bone. They really need the military guy. Alright, onward. Ouch. Best laid plans always go down in this game somehow. Ended up ending after the second round. That's very unlikely. But still, there's a 10%, maybe not terribly unlikely, 10% chance every turn will end there. Just because you always got to roll it, and there's a 1 in 10. Alright. So what happened before that? Well, the Portuguese haven't managed to deal with their revolt. They haven't gotten their fleet back in place. The English put pushed down but lost Cabot, exploring a little further. Spaniards also lost their explorer, exploring a little further. They're going to have to figure out how to get home with minimal losses. I don't think I rolled this actually, and I was supposed to. The French defeated a Venetian attempt to retake Milan. They defeated Bourbon's attempt to move up into France. They set up their own siege in Luxembourg, but that's not going to last because they don't get their they didn't get to establish it long enough. The Turks got their entire force here into Rhodes. Now they're going to get to keep their siege going. That's the one advantage here. But you know, they defeated and destroyed the knights, and now they're going to face the somewhat more difficult La Valette next turn. Now La Valette, though, I can't read this. I think he's got a -2 instead of just a -1, which means he'll be harder to take out in a siege. They're not going to get any troops or anything. But it does delay Turkish entry, I think. They can't really afford to get involved in the war. They're going to be taking stability losses when they were hoping to regain stability. So, yeah, it's kind of a painful prospect across the board for them. I'll do some of the final administrative stuff and come back. Okay, so our net effect we see after the end of all of this, actually the stability has improved quite a bit for most countries. Venice, Spain, France, they've all kind of, well, France not so much, but they've kind of pushed towards the top. Portugal is just struggling at this point. And they kind of probably should just disband these troops because they're incurring native attacks. And yes, the natives have to get very lucky to destroy that army, but until that happens, I mean, they're playing a risk where they just want to get these guys home. So it probably is cheapest for them to disband it, rebuild it at home, and deal with their rebellion there. I didn't do it this turn because I forgot about those units. I was like, oh, I got to get them home, but I didn't really remember. I could just disband them and it would be easier. Spanish get a couple victory points for this that I didn't mark down, and we got some new leaders on the board. This is 1545 ending here. New naval leader for Venice to replace their better leader, but you know, one great naval leader is as good as any other, essentially. Something I forgot at the moment, Milan actually switched hands, if you remember from the event. It's now permanently French, unless, of course, the Spanish retake it during this event. That might have provoked sort of a, hey, I mean, certainly on France's part, hey, why don't we have a white peace? And Venice would love it. Spain doesn't want that, though. They want to regain Milan, and they think they've got a fairly good chance. They were unable to get Bavaria out of the war. No reason for France to try to get the Habsburgs out of the war. So this is going to continue. Venice is really unhappy with this. They're going to allow their alliance to expire this turn, which, of course, makes a Turkish attack more interesting. I don't think Turkey's going to make that attack. I think they want to improve themselves a little more before they go after the Mamluks. They might even be able to do diplomacy on the Mamluks and knock them off the track. Of course, chances are Venice can protect that fairly well and keep a right to intervene. We'll see how that goes. It may not be worth the money for Turkey to try that. All right, well, this is going up, and I don't know. Got one of the annoying leaders. There's a couple of these here. Frederick of Saxony lives between turns 13 and 17, and Zrini of Hungary, who's actually a Transylvanian, I think, goes between 16 and 19 on the same counter. One that's hard because I have to remember that's there if Hungary ends up somehow activated in some way. Actually, with the Habsburgs, I believe he'll come in as a Habsburg leader. I don't know, unless Transylvania has some event in this. And at the same time, you've got Saxony, and it's quite possible that Saxony and the Habsburgs will be at war, in which case I'd want that leader on both sides in both places. It's just an annoyance that doesn't happen with many. I think it only happens with stuff from the expansion, and there's a couple of them where there's that kind of situation. Of course, there's also things, you know, like the Chevalier and La Valette, and the Grand Vizier here, who has a Turkish leader on the other side of him. But those are okay, because they're from the same country. I just have to mark that country on the turn record track. All right, up it goes.